Imagine a world without writing, without kings, without even the wheel. This isn't a fantasy. It was our reality for thousands of years. But in a fertile land nestled between two rivers, a revolution was brewing. This is the story of Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, before the rise of its first great empire. Our journey begins around 10,000 years ago, in what historians call the Pottery Neolithic Age. The Ice Age had retreated, leaving behind a warmer, wetter world. For the first time, humans began to abandon their nomadic lifestyles. In the rolling hills of the Zagros Mountains and the fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, they started to build permanent homes. Villages like Jarmo and Hassuna sprang up, clusters of mud brick houses where communities lived and worked together. Life was still tough. Their toolkits were made of stone, bone, and wood. Flint sickles were used to harvest wild grains, and stone grinders turned those grains into flour. But the big innovation of this era was, as the name suggests, pottery. Firing clay to create durable, waterproof containers was a game-changer. Suddenly, people could store food and water safely, protecting their surplus from pests and spoilage. This simple pot was a critical step towards food security, allowing populations to grow and settlements to become more complex. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were building a future. This period of stability and slow innovation lasted for millennia. But around 6,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened. People discovered a new material, one that would change the world forever: copper. The Copper Age, or Chalcolithic period, had begun. At first, they treated copper like a special kind of rock, hammering it into shape to make ornaments and small tools. But soon, they learned to heat it, to melt it, to cast it into molds. This was the birth of metallurgy. Copper axes were sharper and more durable than stone ones. Copper daggers offered a new kind of prestige and power. This new technology wasn't the only revolution. Around this time, in the southern plains of Mesopotamia, a new people arrived: the Sumerians. Their origins are a mystery, but their impact is undeniable. They drained the marshes, built canals, and turned the arid land into a garden. Cities like Uruk, Ur, and Eridu began to grow, first as small temple towns, then as bustling urban centers with populations in the tens of thousands. And with these cities came another invention that literally set the world in motion: the wheel. It didn't appear overnight. The earliest evidence points to its use not for transport, but for pottery. The potter's wheel allowed for the mass production of ceramics, faster and more uniform than ever before. It wasn't long, however, before someone had the brilliant idea to turn that wheel on its side, put it on an axle, and create the first carts. The world, which had been limited by the speed of a walking human or a pack animal, suddenly got a whole lot bigger. This period of rapid growth also saw the dark side of human nature emerge. As cities grew wealthier and more powerful, they began to compete for land, water, and resources. Around 2700 BCE, we have the first recorded war in history, a brutal conflict between the neighboring city-states of Sumer and Elam. This wasn't a small skirmish. It was organized warfare, a grim testament to the new complexities of urban life. Power was becoming concentrated in the hands of kings and priests, who led their people in both prayer and battle. The world was accelerating, and the next leap forward would be the most profound of all. By 3000 BCE, we enter the early Bronze Age. The discovery that mixing copper with tin created a much harder, more useful alloy bronze unleashed a wave of new possibilities. Bronze tools and weapons were superior in every way, but the most significant invention of this era wasn't made of metal. It was made of ideas. In the bustling temples and administrative centers of Sumerian cities, life had become too complex to manage by memory alone. How many bushels of grain were in the storehouse? How much tribute was owed to the temple? To keep track of it all, they developed a system of pictographs, simple drawings representing objects. Over centuries, these pictures evolved, becoming more abstract, more symbolic. This was the birth of cuneiform, the world's first true writing system. Using a reed stylus to press wedge-shaped marks into wet clay tablets, scribes could now record laws, histories, business transactions, and even literature. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest stories, was first written in these tiny marks. For the first time, human knowledge could be passed down not just through spoken word, but through a permanent physical record. History had begun. The innovations kept coming. The simple digging stick used for planting seeds was transformed into the plow. a revolutionary agricultural tool. Pulled by oxen, the plow could turn over much larger areas of land with far less effort, leading to massive food surpluses. This surplus fed a growing population of non-farmers, artisans, priests, soldiers, and scribes, allowing for even greater specialization and societal complexity. Transportation also took a great leap forward. The same ingenuity that created the wheel was applied to warfare, resulting in the chariot. These light, two-wheeled vehicles, pulled by donkeys or early horses, became the ultimate status symbol and a terrifying weapon of war, giving armies unprecedented speed and mobility on the battlefield. And while the chariot conquered the land, the sailboat conquered the water. By harnessing the power of the wind, Sumerian merchants could now travel up and down the Tigris and Euphrates, and even venture into the Persian Gulf. They traded their grain and textiles for precious goods from afar, wood from Lebanon, copper from Oman, and lapis lazuli from the distant mountains of Afghanistan. These trade networks connected disparate cultures, spreading ideas and technologies across the ancient world. The Sumerian city-states flourished for centuries, a collection of independent, often warring, kingdoms. Each city had its own patron god, its own king, its own magnificent ziggurat reaching for the heavens. They were vibrant centers of art, religion, and innovation. They gave us the 60-second minute, the 60-minute hour, the 360-degree circle, and the foundations of astronomy and mathematics. But this fragmented world of city-states was not destined to last. To the north, in the land of Akkad, a new power was stirring. A man of humble origins, Sargon, was about to unite these disparate cities by force. He would forge them into something the world had never seen before, a true empire. The era of the city-state was drawing to a close, and the age of emperors was about to dawn. The world built by the Sumerians, their inventions, their writing, their cities, would become the foundation for all the great empires that followed. Their legacy was not written in stone, but in the very fabric of civilization itself. History is filled with giants, leaders whose ambitions reshaped the world. But who was the very first? Who was the trailblazer, the one who first dreamed of an empire stretching beyond the horizon? His name was Sargon, and his story isn't just history. It's the beginning of history as we know it. He was the world's first emperor, a man who rose from obscurity to forge a legacy that would echo for millennia. This is the epic tale of Sargon of Akkad. Our story begins not with a king, but with a myth, a legend whispered down through the ages. The story of Sargon's birth is as dramatic as his life. He was born in secret, the son of a high priestess in a town on the Euphrates River. His mother, forbidden to raise a child, placed him in a reed basket sealed with pitch and set him adrift on the great river. It's a story that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Long before Moses, there was Sargon. The river carried the infant downstream until he was found by a man named Akki, a royal gardener. Akki raised the boy as his own son, naming him Shahrukh, which means the true king. Growing up, Sargon knew nothing of his supposed noble birth. He was simply a gardener's boy, tending to the orchards and irrigation canals, learning the rhythms of the earth under the hot Mesopotamian sun. But destiny had other plans. As a young man, Sargon served as a cupbearer to Yurzababa, the king of the powerful city-state of Kish. In ancient Mesopotamia, a cupbearer was no mere servant. He was a trusted confidant, always at the king's side, privy to the secrets of the court. It was a position of influence, and Sargon learned the art of politics and power from the very center of it all. Legend says the goddess Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, favored Sargon. She saw in him a spark, a will to conquer. It was through her divine favor, the story goes, that his path to power began. The reigning king, Yurzababa, grew wary of his ambitious cupbearer. After a disturbing dream, he tried to have Sargon eliminated, first by sending him to the king of Uruk with a clay tablet ordering his own execution. But Sargon, through wit or divine intervention, survived. He not only survived, he thrived. The details are lost to time, but we know this. Sargon eventually overthrew Yurzababa and seized the throne of Kish for himself. The gardener's boy was now a king, but being king of one city wasn't enough. Sargon looked around at the land of Sumer, a patchwork of warring city-states, each with its own king, its own walls, its own gods. For centuries, this had been the way of the world. Sargon saw not a collection of rivals, but a single land waiting to be united. His first major challenge was the most powerful ruler in the region, Lugalzagesi of Uruk. Lugalzagesi had already united many of the Sumerian cities under his own rule and called himself king of the land, he was a formidable opponent. Sargon marched his army south, and in a decisive battle, he captured Lugal-Sagasi. In a symbolic act of ultimate victory, Sargon brought him back to the holy city of Nippur in a dog collar and put him on display at the gate of the main temple. The message was clear: a new power had arrived. This was just the beginning. Sargon then embarked on a series of relentless military campaigns that were unprecedented in their scale and success. He marched his armies east to the lands of Elam, in modern-day Iran. He went west, reaching the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, which the Akkadians called the Upper Sea. He campaigned north into the mountains of Anatolia, securing sources of timber and precious metals. His inscriptions boast that he washed his weapons in the sea. He conquered city after city, tearing down their defensive walls to prevent future rebellions. It was a brutal but effective strategy. For the first time in recorded history, a single ruler controlled a vast territory stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. Sargon built a new capital city, Akkad, a place of legendary wealth and power whose exact location remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. From this new center, he ruled his creation, the Akkadian Empire, the world's first empire. To control such a vast and diverse territory, military might alone wasn't enough. Sargon was as brilliant an administrator as he was a general. He understood that to hold an empire together, you needed more than just soldiers, you needed systems. He standardized weights and measures across his lands, which revolutionized trade and made commerce easier and more reliable. Imagine going from a world where every town had its own units to one unified system. It was a groundbreaking innovation. He also established a standardized system of taxation to fund his government and his massive army. Sargon created what might be the world's first postal service, a network of roads and way stations that allowed messengers to travel quickly across the empire, carrying royal decrees and intelligence reports. He replaced local rulers with loyal Akkadian governors, men he could trust to enforce his will. This created a centralized administration, a true imperial government, rather than just a collection of conquered cities. He also cleverly merged the gods of his Akkadian people with the gods of the Sumerians he had conquered, creating a shared religious culture that helped unify his diverse subjects. His own daughter, Enheduanna, was appointed high priestess of the moon god Nanna in the city of Ur. She became a towering figure in her own right, and her writings are considered the earliest known works of literature by a named author in all of human history. Sargon ruled for an incredible 56 years. His long reign was not without its troubles. He faced numerous rebellions, especially in his later years as the Sumerian cities chafed under Akkadian rule. He put them all down with an iron fist. When he died, he passed his empire on to his sons. For over a century, the Akkadian Empire dominated Mesopotamia, a beacon of power and culture. But like all empires, it eventually fell, crumbling under internal pressure and invasions from outside. Yet Sargon's legacy was permanent. He had fundamentally changed the world. The idea of empire, the concept of a single multicultural state ruled by one powerful leader, was born with him. For the next 2,000 years, kings from Babylon to Assyria would look back to Sargon as the ultimate model of a conqueror and ruler. They copied his titles, told his stories, and dreamed of recreating his legendary empire. He created the blueprint for what it meant to be an emperor. So the next time you hear about the Roman Empire, the Persian Empire, or any great empire in history, remember where it all began. It began with a baby in a basket, a gardener's boy who became a king, and a king who dared to dream on a scale no one had ever imagined before. He was Sargon the Great, the man who didn't just conquer the world, but invented the very idea of it. His story proves that from the humblest of beginnings, the greatest legacies can be forged. Imagine a time long before Rome, before Greece, before even the great pharaohs of Egypt built their pyramids. We're journeying back over 4,000 years to Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. This was a world of walled cities, a patchwork of independent kingdoms constantly at war. In the south, the brilliant Sumerians had established city-states like Uruk, Ur, and Lagash, each with its own king and its own patron god. They invented writing, the wheel, and monumental architecture. To the north, in the land of Akkad, lived a Semitic people, the Akkadians. For centuries, these two cultures coexisted, sometimes trading, often fighting, but always separate. The dream of a united Mesopotamia seemed impossible, a mere fantasy. But history is often shaped by those who dare to dream the impossible. And from this chaotic world of rival cities, a man of humble origins would rise to change the course of human history forever. His name was Sargon, and he would forge the world's first empire. The story of Sargon the Great is shrouded in legend, a tale worthy of a myth. He wasn't born into royalty. According to the stories he himself told, he was the illegitimate son of a priestess, who placed him in a reed basket and set him afloat on the Euphrates River. Found and raised by a gardener, Sargon's early life was far from a king's, yet destiny had other plans. He rose through the ranks to become the cupbearer to the king of Kish, a powerful Sumerian city. This was a position of immense trust and influence. But Sargon's ambition was far greater than serving a king. He saw the endless cycle of warfare weakening the land and envisioned something grander. In a bold move, he rebelled, left Kish, and established his own capital city, Akkad. The exact location of this legendary city remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. But from this new power base, Sargon began to build an army unlike any seen before. It was a professional standing army, loyal not to a city, but to him alone. Armed with powerful composite bows and organized in tight phalanx formations, they were ready to march. Sargon wasn't just building a city. He was building an empire. With his disciplined army, Sargon of Akkad turned his gaze south, towards the wealthy, ancient city-states of Sumer. The campaign that followed was swift and brutal. He first targeted Uruk, ruled by the powerful king Lugal-Zaggisi, who had already managed to unite several Sumerian cities under his own banner. In a series of decisive battles, Sargon's forces crushed the Sumerian coalition. The stories say that after his victory, Sargon captured Lugal-Zaggisi, put a collar on him, and led him in humiliation to the gate of the temple of Enlil in Nippur, the most sacred site in Sumer. It was a powerful statement. A new power had arrived. One by one, the proud walls of War-Lagash and Umma fell before Sargon's military machine. He wasn't content with simply defeating them. He systematically dismantled the walls of the conquered cities, a symbolic and practical act to prevent future rebellion. For the first time in history, the entire region of Mesopotamia, from the northern plains of Akkad to the southern marshes of Sumer, was united under a single ruler. Sargon washed his weapons in the waters of the Persian Gulf, a symbolic gesture declaring the extent of his conquest. He was no longer just a king of a city. He was the king of Sumer and Akkad, the ruler of the known world. The Akkadian Empire was born. Creating an empire is one thing. Holding it together is another. Sargon was not just a conqueror. He was a brilliant administrator. He understood that military might alone wasn't enough to rule a diverse and often rebellious land. He installed loyal Akkadian governors in the conquered Sumerian cities to ensure his authority was maintained. He standardized weights, measures, and even the calendar across his vast domain, which facilitated trade and created a sense of unity. To connect his empire, Sargon ordered the construction of a network of roads. This wasn't just for moving troops quickly. It created the world's first postal service. Clay tablets, the emails of the ancient world, could now be carried by messengers from one end of the empire to the other with unprecedented speed. Trade flourished. Akkadian ships sailed from the Persian Gulf to lands as far away as the Indus Valley in modern-day Pakistan and Oman, bringing back copper, ivory, and other exotic goods. This economic boom was fueled by a cultural one. While Sargon respected Sumerian traditions, he promoted his own Akkadian language. It became the official language of administration and commerce, a common tongue that helped bind the diverse peoples of the empire together. Scribes from every corner of the empire learned to write in Akkadian cuneiform, creating a shared literary and administrative culture. Art also reached new heights, with a new style emphasizing naturalism and the power of the king, a stark contrast to the more static religious art of the Sumerians. The empire wasn't just a territory on a map. It was a melting pot of cultures, ideas, and innovations, all centered on the will of one man. Sargon the Great ruled for an incredible 56 years, a reign of unprecedented length and stability. His legacy is monumental. He created the very template of empire, a model of centralized government, professional armies, and state infrastructure that would be copied by countless rulers for millennia to come, from the Babylonians and Assyrians to the Persians and Romans. The concept of uniting different peoples under a single overarching authority began with him. But empires, especially the first of their kind, are fragile. The very cities Sargon had conquered never truly forgot their independence, and rebellions were a constant threat throughout his reign. After his death, his sons and grandsons, including the great Naram Sin who would declare himself a living god, fought desperately to hold the empire together. They faced internal revolts and external pressures from mountain tribes like the Dushians. Within about 150 years of its founding, the great Akkadian Empire crumbled, and Mesopotamia splintered back into a collection of warring city-states. The legendary city of Akkad itself was lost to the sands of time. Yet the memory of the world's first empire never faded. It became a golden age in the stories of later Mesopotamians, a legend of a time when the whole world was united under one great king. The Akkadian Empire may have been short-lived, but its impact echoed through eternity, proving that from the chaos of a divided world, a single vision could forge an empire and change the world forever. Imagine a vast, sun-scorched landscape. In the distance, a colossal stepped pyramid, a ziggurat, pierces the horizon. This is Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. And it was here, over 4,000 years ago, that the world's very first empire was born. It wasn't forged by a committee or by chance, but by the relentless ambition of one extraordinary man, Sargon of Akkad. This is the story of the Akkadian Empire, a tale of conquest, innovation, and ultimate collapse that echoes through the corridors of history. Before Sargon, Mesopotamia was a patchwork of rival city-states, a land of endless conflict. Sumerian cities like Ur, Uruk, and Lagash vied for dominance, their kings fighting for land, water, and prestige. Into this chaotic world, a man of humble origins would rise to change everything. Legend tells us Sargon was found as a baby, floating in a reed basket on the Euphrates River, much like the later story of Moses. Rescued and raised by a gardener, he eventually became a cupbearer to the king of Kish. But Sargon was destined for more than just serving wine. Through a combination of political cunning and military genius, Sargon seized the throne of Kish. This was just the beginning. With a newly reformed professional army at his command, he embarked on a series of breathtaking campaigns. His soldiers, armed with powerful composite bows and organized in tight phalanx formations, were unlike anything the Sumerians had ever faced. One by one, the proud city-states of Sumer fell. Sargon didn't just defeat them. He united them. He broke down the walls that had separated them for centuries, creating a single, unified territory under his rule. He was no longer just a king of a city. He was the king of a nation. To solidify his new realm, Sargon established a magnificent capital, the city of Akkad. Its exact location remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries, but ancient texts describe it as a city of unparalleled splendor and power. From Akkad, Sargon's influence radiated outwards. He wasn't content with just Mesopotamia. His armies marched east into modern-day Iran, west to the shores of the Mediterranean, and north into Anatolia. For the first time in history, a single ruler controlled a vast multicultural territory, stretching from the Persian Gulf to the cedar forests of Lebanon. The Akkadian Empire was born. How do you control such a massive and diverse empire? This was the challenge Sargon faced, and his solutions were revolutionary. He established a centralized government, a radical departure from the independent city-state model. He appointed trusted governors, many of them his own family members, to rule the provinces, ensuring loyalty and enforcing his will. His daughter, Enheduanna, was appointed high priestess of the moon god Nana in Yor. This was a brilliant political move, blending religious and political power, and she would go on to become the world's first known author, her hymns and poems surviving to this day. To fund his administration and his army, Sargon introduced a standardized system of taxation. Goods and agricultural produce flowed from every corner of the empire to the capital, fueling its growth and power. This wealth was poured back into the empire through ambitious public works projects. Sargon and his successors built and repaired irrigation canals, turning arid land fertile and increasing agricultural yields. They constructed roads that connected the far-flung cities, facilitating trade and the rapid movement of troops. Imposing city walls and fortifications were erected to protect against external threats and internal rebellion. The Akkadians were a deeply religious people, and their polytheistic faith was woven into the fabric of society. They worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses, many adopted from the Sumerians but given Akkadian names. The sky god Anu, the wind god Enlil, and the god of wisdom Ea were among the most important. But it was Ishtar, or Inanna in Sumerian, the goddess of love, fertility, and war, who rose to special prominence under the Akkadians. Temples, the earthly homes of the gods, were the centers of city life. Elaborate rituals and daily offerings were performed by a complex hierarchy of priests and priestesses to ensure divine favor, good harvests, and victory in battle. Sargon himself claimed the gods had chosen him to rule, a powerful piece of propaganda that legitimized his authority in the eyes of his subjects. With political stability came an unprecedented cultural flourishing. The Akkadian Golden Age saw remarkable achievements in art, literature, and technology. One of the most significant unifying forces was language. While Sumerian continued to be used in religious contexts, the Semitic language of Akkadian became the official language of administration and daily life across the empire. It was written in cuneiform script on clay tablets, and its adoption helped to create a shared cultural identity among the diverse peoples Sargon had conquered. This was, in effect, the first international language of diplomacy and trade. Speaking of trade, the Akkadian economy boomed. With the empire's borders secure and its roads safe, merchants traveled farther than ever before. Akkadian trade networks extended to the Indus Valley in modern-day Pakistan, to Oman for copper, and to Afghanistan for precious lapis lazuli. This influx of exotic goods and raw materials fueled Akkadian craftsmanship. Artisans produced stunningly realistic sculptures, intricate cylinder seals used for signing documents, and beautiful jewelry. Akkadian art broke from the more stylized traditions of the Sumerians, showing a new interest in naturalism and individual portraiture, a reflection of the empire's focus on the power and personality of the king. But empires, no matter how mighty, are fragile. The Akkadian Empire, forged in fire and ambition, would last for less than 2 centuries. Sargon's successors, his sons Rimish and Manishtushu, and especially his grandson Naram Sin, faced constant challenges to their rule. The formerly independent city-states of Sumer never fully accepted Akkadian domination, and rebellions were frequent and bloody. Naram Sin, who declared himself a living god, was a powerful military leader who crushed these revolts and expanded the empire to its greatest extent. But his reign also marked the beginning of the end. The empire was under attack from all sides. To the east, the Gutians, a fierce tribal people from the Zagros Mountains, began to raid Akkadian lands with increasing frequency. These external pressures were compounded by a catastrophic environmental crisis. Scientific evidence from ice cores and soil samples suggests that a severe multi-century drought struck the region around 2200 BCE. The once mighty Tigris and Euphrates rivers shrank. The intricate irrigation systems failed. Famine swept across the land, leading to widespread social unrest and weakening the central government's grip on power. The empire, which had relied on agricultural surplus to feed its cities and armies, began to starve. The combination of internal rebellion, external invasion, and climate change was too much to bear. The Akkadian state fractured. The final blow came when the Gutians swept down from the mountains, sacking the city of Akkad and bringing the world's first empire to a crashing halt. The great capital, the heart of Sargon's dream, was abandoned and its location lost to the sands of time. The dream of a unified Mesopotamia was shattered, and the land returned to a collection of warring city-states. Though it was short-lived, the legacy of the Akkadian Empire is immense. It created a blueprint for empire that would be copied by the Babylonians, Assyrians, and Persians for millennia to come. The concepts of a centralized government, a standing army, and the use of language as a unifying tool were all Akkadian innovations. The legend of Sargon the Great, the man who rose from nothing to conquer the known world, became a foundational myth, inspiring future kings for thousands of years. The fall of Akkad also serves as a timeless cautionary tale. It reminds us that no power is absolute and that even the mightiest empires can be brought down by a combination of human conflict and the unforgiving forces of nature. It poses a profound question that we still grapple with today. Are great empires destined to rise and fall in a perpetual cycle, or can we learn from the ghosts of Akkad to build a more sustainable future? Imagine over 4,000 years ago a civilization so powerful it forged the world's very first empire. This was Akkad. Its cities, like the legendary Agada, were marvels of their time, with towering ziggurats and grand palaces. Bustling streets were filled with merchants, soldiers, and scribes. Under the visionary king Sargon the Great, Akkad united the disparate city-states of Mesopotamia, stretching its influence from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. It was a golden age of power, innovation, and ambition. Yet, in just a few generations, this mighty empire vanished. Its great cities turned to dust, its name almost lost to history. What happened? How could the world's first superpower crumble so completely, leaving behind a mystery that would puzzle historians for millennia? Join us as we uncover the epic story of the rise and catastrophic fall of the Akkadian Empire. Before its mysterious end, Akkad was the cradle of innovation. Imagine a world without mail. The Akkadians changed that. They developed the world's first postal service, a revolutionary system using cuneiform script etched onto clay tablets. These tablets, encased in clay envelopes, were carried by messengers along a network of newly constructed roads, connecting the vast empire. This wasn't just for royal decrees. It was the backbone of a thriving economy. These roads didn't just carry mail. They were arteries of commerce. Caravans loaded with grain from the fertile plains, timber from the mountains of Lebanon, and precious metals from Anatolia traveled these routes. The Akkadians standardized weights and measures, making trade smoother and more reliable than ever before. Their merchants established extensive networks, bringing unprecedented wealth and exotic goods into the heart of Mesopotamia. This economic boom fueled the construction of magnificent cities and monuments, testaments to their prosperity and power. The Akkadian Empire wasn't just a military conquest. It was a marvel of administration and engineering, a blueprint for all future empires. It was a world of order, connection, and flourishing trade, a true golden age. But even the brightest gold can tarnish, and a shadow was beginning to fall upon this great civilization, a threat not from an invading army but from the sky itself. The lifeblood of Mesopotamia has always been its two great rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. For generations, their predictable floods nourished the soil, creating the Fertile Crescent. But around 2200 BCE, something changed. The skies fell silent. The reliable rain stopped coming, and a devastating centuries-long drought took hold. Scientists today call this the 4.2 kiloyear event, a period of abrupt climate change that affected civilizations across the globe. For Akkad, it was a catastrophe. The once lush fields of wheat and barley, the breadbasket of the empire, cracked and turned to dust. The mighty rivers shrank to mere trickles, their banks receding to expose barren mudflats. Canals, the intricate irrigation systems that were the pride of Mesopotamian engineering, ran dry. The harvests failed year after year. Famine, a specter they thought they had conquered, returned with a vengeance. Archaeological evidence paints a grim picture. Layers of windblown sand covering what were once fertile farmsteads, and human remains showing signs of severe malnutrition. The people starved. Desperate refugees from the barren north flooded into the southern cities, placing an unbearable strain on already dwindling food supplies. The gods seemed to have abandoned Akkad. The Great Drought was not just an environmental crisis. It was an existential one, shaking the very foundations of the empire and setting the stage for its violent implosion. As the famine tightened its grip, the brilliant administrative structure of the Akkadian Empire began to fracture. The central authority of the king, once absolute, started to crumble. Starving people don't listen to distant rulers. Loyalty, once given to the empire, now shifted to survival. The regional governors, the powerful ensis who ruled the city-states in the king's name, saw an opportunity. They had their own people to feed, their own power to protect. They began to hoard grain, refusing to send tribute to the capital. Why send food to Agada when your own citizens were starving in Ur or Kish? This defiance sparked a chain reaction of political infighting. The king's court itself was paralyzed by paranoia and rivalry, as different factions vied for control over the empire's rapidly diminishing resources. The postal system, once a symbol of unity, now carried messages of rebellion and conspiracy. The standardized weights and measures were ignored as local lords minted their own currency and set their own trade rules. The empire was tearing itself apart from within. Riots erupted in the cities as hungry mobs clashed with soldiers. Desperate farmers abandoned their land, turning to banditry to survive. The roads, once safe arteries of commerce, became dangerous routes plagued by robbers. The internal chaos was a death spiral. Each act of rebellion weakened the central government further, which in turn encouraged more defiance. The great empire of Sargon was no longer a unified state, but a collection of warring city-states, each fighting for its own survival. It was a house divided, weak and vulnerable, ripe for the picking. Into this chaos stormed a new, terrifying enemy. From the rugged Zagros Mountains to the east, a people known as the Gutians descended upon the plains of Mesopotamia. To the sophisticated Akkadians, the Gutians were barbarians fierce, Nomadic warriors with a completely different culture and language. The Akkadians, weakened by decades of drought and internal strife, were no match for them. Their once invincible army was a shadow of its former self, malnourished and demoralized. The Gutian invasion was not a single organized campaign, but a relentless series of raids. They swept across the land like a wildfire, sacking towns and villages, plundering what little food and wealth remained. The Akkadian defenses, poorly coordinated and thinly stretched, collapsed. City after city fell. The final blow came with the sack of the capital itself, the magnificent city of Akkad. Ancient texts describe the horror. Temples were desecrated, palaces were burned, and the population was slaughtered or enslaved. The Gutians, as one poet wrote, carried off the kingship of Sumer. They had no interest in ruling the empire they had conquered. They were plunderers. Their arrival marked the final bloody end of the Akkadian dream. The world's first empire, which had once ruled from sea to sea, was extinguished in a storm of fire and steel brought down by an enemy who appeared from the mountains just as Akkad was at its weakest. So, how did the world's first empire fall? There was no single cause but a perfect storm of disasters. It began with a force of nature, a catastrophic, centuries-long drought that crippled its agricultural heartland. This environmental collapse triggered a social one, as famine led to mass migration and widespread starvation. The internal fabric of the empire then unraveled. Political infighting, rebellion by local governors, and civil unrest shattered the central authority that had held the diverse regions together. Finally, with the empire on its knees, a weakened and divided Akkad was unable to fend off the external invasion of the Gutian warriors, who delivered the final fatal blow. It was a chain reaction: climate change leading to famine, famine to civil war, and civil war to foreign conquest. The fall of Akkad serves as a powerful, timeless lesson. It teaches us that no empire, no matter how powerful, is invincible. It shows how profoundly human civilization is tied to the environment, and how quickly social order can collapse when those foundations are shaken. The legacy of Akkad is not just in its pioneering achievements, its postal service, its roads, its imperial vision, but also in its dramatic fall. It stands as history's first great cautionary tale, a ghostly reminder from the dawn of civilization that even the mightiest empires can turn to dust. Thank you for joining us on this journey back in time. If you found this story of the world's first fallen empire fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of the past. Let us know in the comments what ancient civilization you'd like us to explore next. See you in the next video.